Keith Lee, the restaurant messiah, has yet again went to a city and had a terrible experience as far as the food. What is going on? Why does this keep happening? And why is it happening so much with Keith Lee? All of the things, we got to talk about it, and we got to be honest. So let's get to it.
Y'all already know what time it is. I got the black V-neck on.
What's going on, you all? We got to talk about Keith Lee and his recent disaster of a food tour in DC. And none of us are really surprised. And some of us are not surprised because of specific reasons. And some of us are kind of using specific tropes to talk about the Black experience and restaurants in general and the quote unquote green wall aesthetic. But there is so much going on, and we got to be honest. And I got to say this, like starting this video off, I know that Keith Lee has this dedicated fan base. And I feel like a lot of the fans are not being honest when some folks are offering criticisms that are legitimate and things that Keith Lee and his team should be considering to fix and fine tune if we want this to be something that is long lasting and is substantial for everyone. Because as a creator, you're looking at certain things always. You should be looking at things that you can evolve on, things that you can improve. I mean, girl, look how I got a whole microphone. Like, girl, y'all remember I was recording in a bathroom at one point. So there's always the opportunity to fix and fine tune things. There's always going to be that as a creator, as you provide a better experience or whatever it is for your audience. So Keith Lee went to the DMV for his food tour, and he asked for suggestions on the restaurants to go to, and people made suggestions on things that they like and things that they did not like. And I feel like we have to pay attention to that, because this is what happens every time that Keith Lee goes to these restaurants and people are name dropping. And I'm a little bit confused, because on one hand, when Keith Lee mentions that he's going and he wants to do this to small restaurants who are not getting that much attention or whatever, the restaurants that a lot of people start naming are not those. Like when we say mom and pop shops, we mean smaller restaurants that are ran by mother and father or some type of family thing, not a family that is large to scale, that y'all are, you know, multiple locations across and that y'all are known. Like that is the thing that was kind of, you know, with Milk and Honey. Like it's not a mom and pop restaurant. It might give that aesthetic. So when Keith Lee is getting these recommendations from restaurants that people really love, people like, you got to try the food here is amazing, or even a restaurant that they can't stand and they want to see them be exposed, Keith Lee's team has to do a better job of research. Like Keith Lee named that he went to 12 restaurants, and you know, more than half of them were so bad that he could not post a video about it because the business will get like negative reviews and it will be bad on them. There was even a restaurant that did not have running water. The servers or whoever were not washing their hands. They were, you know, handling food and handling money at the same time. And he did not want to experience that. Definitely understandable. There was even a situation where one restaurant fried his food, and Keith Lee has a shellfish allergy. They fried it in seafood. Like they fried food that is not seafood in seafood oil. And that's something that restaurants do to, you know, cut costs. And we're going to also talk about that because a lot of these restaurants don't have the capital. That's something I've been saying in several of my videos, even when it comes to these celebrities owning these restaurants and stuff. They don't have the capital, so they have to cut costs. And all restaurants cut costs. That's how you make profit. You exploit the labor and a lot of other things. A lot of folks do the labor, but you know, you have to do other things to make the dollar stretch. That's why some restaurants don't have silverware and glassware, because that stuff gets broken, it gets stolen or whatever, and they have to constantly replace that. So it's cheaper to just do plastic and have plastic utensils, because you don't have to worry about constantly replacing that, because there's a certain number of glassware that you should be ordering and replacing each and every month because of things being messed up. Like, that's the cost of doing business. But folks don't want to do that because, again, they want to extract as much capital from this project as they can, and it ends up showing up all the time. When I say that Keith Lee should be doing research, people are online giving their recommendations, and Keith Lee should have someone who is more knowledgeable about the things, talking to folks and doing research. It takes absolutely nothing to go and Google some of these restaurants. I'm going to be completely honest. For me, TikTok is not the first place I'm going to look at a restaurant. I feel like, younger generations and folks are starting to go to TikTok for research. And I don't mind seeing that for certain things, for certain experiences, but there's a reason why social media post versus reality. That's why we see those viral videos of this is what it looks like in the post on TikTok and Instagram Reels. But when I went there, this is what it looks like. Because a lot of these people who are doing these videos and stuff are doing this to get a following. The difference between them and someone who's doing a Yelp or a Google review is that there is usually no picture or no name or branding around it. They're just leaving a review. I went to a tire shop last month because I had a nail in my tire, and the team did a really good job, and they got me really quick. And I was like, hey, you know what? They said, hey, can you do a review? And I could have just said, no, I'm not doing a review. I did a review because the place did a good job. They got me in and out. They got my tire fixed and all of that. And it was relatively cheap. So yes, I left them a review. I'm not trying to get a following off of going and having this experience. But if I'm somebody who is trying to build a brand or a following online and going to this tire shop and recording and doing all of that other stuff, I might not be as honest about my experience because that's not going to gain me a following. It's cute every once in a while, like to drag and say you didn't have a good experience, but you want to have good reviews and good experiences so folks can trust you as a quote unquote positive person. That's kind of why I see Keith Lee not wanting to give bad reviews, because he does not want to be associated with negativity, but at the same time, laying the groundwork for people to go and find out where he got the food from. Like, you could just not say anything. But there's also another conversation about Keith Lee and how he moves. And I feel like a lot of folks do not necessarily want to be honest about this quote unquote positivity and no negativity thing. Like, it is almost impossible to do it if you're reviewing restaurants and you're being authentic. Like, you can review and be honest without being mean. But some people want to appeal to be higher than thou or whatever. And I'm not saying anything bad necessarily about Keith Lee, but we have to be honest about how you project certain things to look a certain type of way while we see other things coming out, like the whole experience with Taraji and the Rose thing. He got a little bit of backlash from that because it wasn't that serious. If Taraji mispronounced your name or did something, you could have just brushed it off like, hey, you know what, Taraji, like, she did that. She had a long night. It is what it is. An easy response. But to record and post to say, hey, don't give me this, or you like like this is my issue or whatever, it was unnecessary. With great power comes great responsibility. Like, Keith Lee, if you all do not want to admit it or not, is not just a man sitting and reviewing food in a truck anymore. He is a influencer with a huge dedicated following who is getting brand deals from big corporations. Like, he had a brand deal with one of the food delivery companies, and that was a little bit of a mess. He had a brand deal with, I think, Hyundai. It's not me and you. Even me, Hyundai is not coming to me to have me sit in no car and talk about, like, they're not doing that. Like, Keith Lee is not a regular person. And we have to let go of thinking that these social media influencers or whatever celebrities are regular people because they do certain things. Politicians know that. That's why they'll go to one of our favorite spots or go to a donut shop or whatever to appeal that they are everyday people, and they're not. They have a whole team who is taking pictures of them doing this And also security stop you from walking up to them. They're not like you and I. They're going to high-end restaurants when they want to. They're having dinner at their million-dollar homes. They're not like us. And I'm not saying Keith Lee is one of those people, but Keith Lee is not a regular person sitting down reviewing restaurants in a car. He is somebody with millions of followers on TikTok who is verified on multiple platforms, who is now able to do interviews and stuff and, say one thing about a specific restaurant and get them a big, boost in visibility. So we have to let go of this idea that he's just a regular person. Yes, we can talk about the quote unquote palette of Keith Lee. Like, he's not going to Michelin star restaurants. And let me be honest, Michelin star really doesn't mean that much to me, because if the food is not good, it's just not good. And a lot of the Michelin star restaurants cater to whiteness. That was catered towards upper class white folks. Like the whole history of Michelin period, the guide, they were selling cars back a long time ago. Probably back when they were selling slaves too, or owning slaves. So it's just like, that was never our thing anyway. That was never our thing to begin with. So there's nothing wrong with Keith Lee going to these soul food places and getting food to go and tasting it. You do lose a little bit of the experience getting food to go. I would say that it decreases it a little bit, unless you're going to something like a food truck. And a lot of places in these cities don't have that food truck thing. Like, there's a couple of spaces that you might go to that cater to that. If Keith Lee is wanting to get that, then he should focus on folks who do that type of work. Like, go to restaurants that are that, like, hey, we're a food truck. We focus on to go. Like, we focus on to go. When you're doing to go at certain spots, there are certain restaurants I go to that they have things on the menu they will not do to go. Like, one of my favorite ramen spots, E-Ramen in Midtown, they have this roll that is really, really good. Chicken and shrimp roll. It's so good. And they do not have it on the to-go menu. And I can understand why. Like, there's places who don't do, like, even Rockefeller oysters or whatever. They don't do it to go because it's like, hey, girl, we don't want no issues. Like nachos, some places do not do nachos to go. They don't want that to be messed up when you get there and you complain. Like, they know that the quality is not going to be the same when you get home or whatever, and they just do not want to deal with that. So Keith Lee needs to hire someone, and it's no shade. It has to be somebody who understands the assignment. It cannot be somebody who is a friend or a family member that's doing a little bit of work. Like, it has to be somebody who is knowledgeable and is able to research and sift through the BS. A lot of the restaurants that people were recommending, like Jerk at Night, was a restaurant that even I have heard of, like even Kane, places that, are really good, like relatively like good, but folks know them. Like, this is not a mom and pop shop. Like, this is a place that is known. And I also want to talk about, like, quote unquote known places, because for the people who are critiquing Keith Lee and saying that his palette is limited and, the places he going to, like, all these things, we also have to factor in that the places that these people are recommending are coming from folks who want to be locals and they're not. A lot of these recommendations are coming from gentrifiers. No shade. Like, even me staying in the area that is being heavily gentrified, I'm a part of that. Like, just being completely honest. And there has been conversations about people who are tourists and people who are travelers. I like to talk to people in the community and ask them what they like and what they enjoy. Like, hey, what restaurant you go to? But also, the area is not the same. The area is heavily gentrified. So I'm talking to someone who is not a local, someone who doesn't live here, has moved from another city, and has started anew, like myself. Like, a lot of the folks that my neighbors are not folks who are from Atlanta. They are from other parts of the US and just so happen to, find a quote unquote better quality of life for themselves in Atlanta. So what is local even what does it even mean at this point when the locals are not there? And the local owned restaurants are no longer there because the people who lived in the area could not afford to keep it up. Like, we also have to talk about gentrification and how it has affected a lot of Black owned restaurants. The mom and pop restaurants did exist. There were a lot of Black mom and pop restaurants, but now how many places have you seen that was a spot or whatever is now a luxury apartment building or luxury like condos or even townhomes? I'll tell you, there was some, specifically Atlanta, there was 2 queer restaurants, Joe's on Juniper and Einstein's, that I used to love to go to in the summertime. It was my spot. They had a cute patio. That whole area is now like luxury apartments and probably like condos at this point. Like, the area is not even me being here since 2015, Midtown has completely changed. It's not the same. And that is happening at white-owned restaurants, white places. So we understand, and there's this saying that if America catches a cold, Black Americans catch the flu. And it's real. Since we're talking about flu, let's talk about the pandemic. The pandemic obliterated restaurants point blank, period. Restaurants had to find a way to survive. So restaurants started to rely on services like DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub to make up for the lack of people coming in. And they were also being messed over because these companies were charging money for their stuff being on their app. Like, they had to raise their menu prices to be able to compensate for, the lack of, money profit they're getting because they're giving it to these apps who essentially are not doing anything but providing a platform. That's it. And, a lot of these folks were already doing deliveries, but they were not doing it at that scale. And now that all of us are online, looking at these places, that's what we're using to order food, and they don't have a choice. The same way with Apple Pay. Like, a lot of us use Apple Pay, but Apple takes a percentage of the money every time we use Apple Pay. There's a reason why certain places do not take Apple Pay, because they do not want to pay Apple each and every time someone, they don't want to do that. So if we are to understand, if America catches a cold, Black Americans catch the flu, we are talking about the pandemic and how restaurants were already affected, but Black restaurants in general were affected on a higher level. When we say we are losing recipes, this is what's going on. It's not that, we are trying to lose them. We're being pushed to lose them. We have gentrification happening. We have even, as simple as we want to put it, Black folks trying to move to other cities to start a better way of life. We are also participating in gentrification. Like, we are bringing in our income compared to someone who stays in this area who doesn't make the same amount of money to us. Like, this is capitalism working, and people are being forced out. Like, it's a real thing. And we also need to have a conversation about the restaurant mentality, like everyone trying to open up a restaurant for the wrong reasons. Because I'm in the mindset, I want to support a Black owned restaurant. I do that. But if a Black owned restaurant is doing amazing and they're getting the volume and the, visibility and the money, are the Black employees being fairly compensated? Because there's one thing to be talking about the Black owned restaurant doing well, and then another report and 2 lawsuits being filed because you're stealing wages from your Black employees. Like, we really have to have a conversation about that, because how many of these Black folks who we look up to that have owned these Black restaurants showed us that they are full-fledged capitalists? Like, we've had 2, just thinking, Rick Ross was one of them, who was, sued in Mississippi for like stealing wages. Like, the federal government was suing Wingstop, some of the Wingstops that Rick Ross owned, and he had employees paying for things that they should not be paying for uniforms. And even Pinky, who owns Slutty Vegan, was sued by previous employees for, not being paid their wages and their tips, like unpaid wages. Even Darius Cooks, who had a restaurant somewhere in Atlanta, shut down out of nowhere, and employees even walked up to me and talked about them not receiving their check for the last week or two that they worked. So it's just, we have to talk about Black capitalism not saving us. Like, we really need to have a conversation about that. And we got to stop getting caught up in the visibility and identity politics of it all and focus on, are these people being paid a fair wage? Because no shade, some of these restaurants, and I mean this in all respect, don't need to be open. If you cannot provide running water at your place, your establishment, I don't care about you being a Black-owned restaurant. Like, I understand the disparities and the things that you're facing, lack of access to capital and resources and all these things. But if you're going to use that to exploit labor out of other folks, it's just like, I'd rather for you just not to have it at this point. So when we critique Keith Lee in general and talk about his experience, even him going to these places and stuff, like, yeah, Keith Lee could do a better job of researching and, going to actual mom and pop spots or whatever. Like, even the whole thing with Jerk at Night, they were prepared for him. They were ready for him. And I've heard some negative things about Jerk at Night. Folks have said that they should not be open. Like, they had issues with them, but something is going on because these restaurants are still open. They're still doing well. So it's just, we also have to factor in that our palates are different. Like, our palates are like different. Some people like certain things and some people don't like certain things, but we are also heavily influenced by TikTok culture. I was watching this one YouTuber, and he was the one actually made me want to do this video about Keith Lee. He did a video of how TikTok is ruining travel, and he came up with this term called the TikTok tax. And it's basically describing how TikTok will make us believe that a place is really good, and it's not. Like, he went to a restaurant and he was looking for this dessert in Amsterdam, and looking at the Google reviews, they had a 3.3, but everybody's like hyping it up on TikTok. But he said there's other places that this dessert is way cheaper and tastes better. But the aesthetics of it all, like, we want to go to the place that's being hyped up, that's getting the attention. TikTok, social media has influenced us all. There's a reason why when we go to the clubs, the dance floor does not exist anymore. Like, as much as we want to drag and say it, we are participating in it. Like, we're saying these things while also, when we go to the club, we're not worried about dancing and experience the time, the night with everybody else. We're experiencing it through online. Like, we want other folks to see us have a good time. So much to the point that people will believe that you don't do anything because you don't post on social media. Like, even I'm reminded, like, oh, do you go out? Do you watch? I was like, yeah, girl, I do. But every time I go, even as me with the following, I don't post every time I go out. Like, I just be in the moment sometimes. Like, I really don't want to do any of this. I just want to be in the moment. But you have to. There's a reason why, there are nothing but sections in the club, because the clubs understand, like, hey, we can charge all of y'all even more money and have y'all buying bottles and stuff, even if it's not the bottles y'all think y'all buying, because y'all want to be seen online. Like, y'all want to post the Instagram story. Y'all want to have the reel of y'all having fun with y'all friends. It's not necessarily about having fun. It's about the aesthetic of it. As much as we want to talk about the grass wall aesthetic and all that, we play into it. So we can't blame the system for working how it is. Like, hey, this is what y'all like. Y'all like, and I have to say to my friends, I'm not going to no hookah spot. Like, I'm not going to no hookah spot. I don't want no hookah. I want no hookah. And I don't want to hear loud music at brunch. I want to talk to folks. Doesn't mean that I don't want to be around quote unquote ghetto stuff. I just want to enjoy good food and talk to my friends. I don't want to be in a loud spot where everybody is trying to have fun, but they're worried about how fun looks like online. Because a lot of y'all, honestly, no shade, are not having fun. Is your trip only fun out the country when you have to post that you're out the country? That's the question that I be asking folks. Like, is your trip fun, or do you want folks to see you having fun? And we can talk about memories and all the other stuff, but if that's the case, then we don't have to post it. We can just keep it. But we want people to see us doing these things. Storytelling has changed. We used to have folks come and we tell them and show them pictures and stuff and all the other stuff, but now we are tied to our phones and we're always in it. So yes, we can critique Keith Lee and the things that he needs to be doing, which some of the stuff I agree with, but we also have to take accountability for how we are moving and what we expect. Keith Lee should be able to go to all the soul food restaurants across the US and try the food. If the food ain't good, it's just not good. And that's been my experience in Atlanta, that I have not had good soul food in hardly any of the restaurants in Atlanta. I don't really eat soul food like that, but the places that people have hyped up are just mid. And, you know, a lot of things that go and factor in that, like the restaurants are trying to pull every dollar they can. So they're going cheap on certain things. Like, it's just what it is. And we need to be honest about that. We need to be honest about that. Like, these black mom and pop restaurants do not exist. There's a reason why Popeyes has the black woman love that chicken from Popeyes when the corporation is owned by a white person or a white group of venture capitalists. Like, a white corporation, like, girl, like, it's Aunt Jemima, all that all over again, like putting a black person, Uncle Ben's rice is just, hey, black, you know, but, you know, no, it's not. It's not black. It's actually not black at all. But yes, so I want us to have a conversation about it. I want us to be honest. I apologize for the video being so long, but this is something that's very passionate to me, and I want us to do a better job. I just want us to do a better job and have more understanding of the world around us, and not just using this to rag on Keith Lee and rag on black restaurants being bad and all the other stuff. Like, because the anti-blackness jumps out a lot in these criticisms of these black-owned restaurants. Like, it jumps out really bad. And yes, y'all do not be this critical of white-owned restaurants like that. Like, y'all joke about McDonald's ice cream machine not working all the time, but McDonald's does not get grouped into that. Like, we still go. Y'all still go to McDonald's and get whatever they have. Like, you still go, but you don't group them together. If you have a bad experience at a white-owned restaurant, I don't hear folks saying, oh, these white-owned restaurants are bad. Like, the only time I hear that is when y'all talk about the racism that y'all have experienced in said restaurant, a whole bunch of white folks. That's the only time. But I've never heard the term white restaurants, because there are some bad white restaurants. I've been to a couple of them, but it's easy to get a reaction out of folks when you're dragging certain things like that. It's not sustainable, but, you know, you're definitely getting attention from it, from dragging these restaurants and stuff. And some of these restaurants deserve to be dragged. There are a couple of brunch spots in Atlanta that definitely need to be dragged. But, you know, it is what it is. But yes, I hope that we learn from this and we take some stuff from this. Tell me what y'all thought about it. Let me know in the comments. And I also have done a more detailed video about Keith Lee and some other things on Patreon if you're interested in that. But tell me your thoughts. Let me know in the comments, and I'll talk y'all later. Bye.